guys and gals, lords and ladies, saints and sinners of every kind. Welcome to Rise in Jerusalem, your Catholic podcast for teens. I am your guest speaker, Emma McLaughlin. I am Connor's younger sister, and he has asked me to talk about the little way of St. Therese of Lisieux. Now, this is a really helpful doctrine for me, because a lot of times in my life, I feel like I'm living from one event to the next, from point A to point B, and not really using the in-between time to serve God. You know, I mean, how do you throughout the boring days? The monotonous things. It's easy when you're doing something cool or amazing, or you're on a retreat, or, you know, all those really awesome things that you could do. But what about those times in between? Well, fortunately, there is a solution for this. It is called the Little Way of St. Therese of Lisieux. Therese was born in Lisieux, France in the late 1800s. She was a Carmelite sister, one of 5 children. Her mother died when she was 6 years old, and all of her siblings entered cloistered convents. Now, Therese knew, as a sister, hidden away from the world, that she wasn't called to greatness. She wasn't going to be Joan of Arc saving France, or Thomas Aquinas writing the Summa Theologica. She didn't have those great big things. She didn't have any of the things we have now. She didn't have events like that. She's sat in prayer all her life. In fact, she died when she was about in her early 20s. But she served God so much better in her little cloistered convent that she has become a doctor of the church and one of the greatest saints. The Pope called her the greatest saint of modern times. Now, Therese had this deep yearning within her to be a martyr for God, to give him so much love, to be a warrior, to be a priest, to be a prophet. She wanted to do so much for him, but she knew that in her little convent, she couldn't do any of these things. She couldn't go out and convert people in Africa. She couldn't do great things. But she learned that she could do little things with great love. She knew that she was she considered herself too little and too weak to climb the great steps to heaven, like the great saints have. So she decided to use the elevator. Yeah, there were elevators back then. They just invented them. She wanted a way to God that was, and I'm quoting, very straight, very short, and totally new. She knew that if God put the desire in her to be a great saint, then she could be. But she could not be that on her own. So she decided to use the elevator. She decided to take this very straight, short, and new way up to God. And that's how she found the little way. Now, she compared herself and the great saints to flowers in a garden. Joan of Arc and Thomas Aquinas were roses or giant lilies or beautiful, wonderful flowers that you give someone on Valentine's Day that are, you know, they're wonderful, they're beautiful, they're big, they're such a huge beauty. And she knew that she couldn't be a big flower. She wasn't called to that. But she knew that even little flowers are beautiful, that they give glory to God as well. If there weren't little violets or daisies, then there wouldn't be springtime beauty. There wouldn't be fields of little flowers. There'd just be all the big ones. So she embraced her calling to be a little flower. She let God water her and care for her and shine on her as the sun, just as he does to all his flowers. And she was content in swaying in the breeze and being his in the little way he had called her to be. So how did she live out this calling to be a little flower? Instead of performing those great big actions that the great saints did, she performed little actions with great love. Every day in her convent, she did every little thing she could, and she gave it as a gift, as a flower to Jesus. She said that picking up a pin with great love can convert a soul. One of my favorite quotes by St. Therese is, "Miss no single opportunity of making some small sacrifice. Here by a smiling look, there by a kindly word, always doing the smallest right and doing it all for love." A smile can bring God love. A kind word can bring God love. You don't have to save France. You don't have to write the Summa Theologica. You can live every day with little acts of love. And those little acts of love are like little beads on a necklace that as soon as you add more and more and more, you create something beautiful. You don't have to put one giant bead. You can create a bunch of little beads, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's simple, and it's lovely, like a violet or a daisy. It's not a rose. It's something little and sweet and just as beautiful. So every day, Therese would live out this little way. She actually, one of my favorite stories of her helping was from Vespers to dinner. There was a job in the convent of bringing one of the elderly sisters to dinner. And Therese took this job as one of the youngest people there. The sister wasn't very happy about this, and she gave Therese so much complaints and so much fuss, but Therese thought of carrying Jesus. She thought, I can help this sister, and I can bring people closer to Jesus by offering this as a sacrifice, by giving God love. So she would go out of her way to smile at the sister, to say kind words, to be very humble and apologize for going too fast or too slow, even though the sister was being really picky. She would even cut her bread for her once she got to the table because she realized this was hard for the sister. And when she left, she'd give her her best smile. She tried to be this kind, beautiful way to all the sisters and to take whatever misunderstanding with love. Even though she was living with her sisters, she didn't go out of her way to talk to them. In fact, she went out of her way not to talk to her sisters because she offered that as a sacrifice. She didn't have to die a martyr, but she could die as a martyr in little ways. In fact, she was so nice to one sister who she really didn't like, especially, that kind of annoyed her. But she was so nice to her that sister asked her one day, why are you so nice to me? Why are you always so happy to see me? And St. Therese says, it's because I love you. But because God was loving the sister through her, because she chose to let God work through her in every little way. Now, Therese would tell these beautiful stories of her childhood to the sisters at recreation. So her oldest sister, who was the Mother Superior, Pauline, she asked Therese to write down the story of her life because it was such a beautiful story and it gave the other sisters so much joy. So Therese wrote this story of her soul. And as she was writing this, it revealed so many beautiful secrets about her spiritual childhood, about being a little flower for God, about riding that elevator to heaven and giving yourself to God in every little thing instead of trying to do the great big things, to climb the great big steps, to do what God has called her to do. This story was so beautiful that after Pauline read it, she was blown away. And one of the other sisters asked Therese to write down how to be a little flower, how to give herself to God in such a straight, short, and new way. The 3 books she wrote were published. It's called Story of a Soul by St. Therese of Lisieux. It's her autobiography. And her sisters actually published it. It has been sold around the world. It has converted so many people. It is such a tool because this little way is such a straight way to God. It is such a great way to give yourself in every little way, every big way, any way possible, with great love. Therese died at a very young age in her early 20s, but she lived such a beautiful life, and she gave herself so completely to God that she was made a saint and a doctor of the church, and one of the popes called her the greatest saint of modern times. So we can follow this little way, just as many other people have. When we're living in those in-between moments from one thing to the next, don't just focus on the other things. Focus on today. Let today matter. Love God today. By loving God in every little thing, a little sister was made a doctor of the church and a beautiful saint. We can do that too. We can love God in every little thing by being nice to your siblings, by smiling at the kid in the hallway who doesn't usually get a smile, by going to a friend's game if you don't want to, by helping your little sister out, by doing the dishes when you weren't asked. There are so many little things we can do with great love. How many in-between moments do we just miss? We can make something beautiful for God if we use every big, every little opportunity He gives us to love Him. So when you're feeling like you're in those in-between moments, think about that elevator. Think about that little flower. Think about that necklace. Think about riding up to God through every little action. Think about being his little flower and letting him shower on you and carry you up there and just using every little thing he gives you. And try to connect those little beads to make something beautiful for him. I would highly encourage reading Story of a Soul. It is a beautiful story that changed the way I looked at the world. And you can pretty much buy it anywhere, like Amazon, Catholic Company. It's going to be on any Catholic website. And it's a good read. It's a short read. It's a fun read. So please do consider that if you wanted to look more into the little way. Have a great week. Thank you so much for watching. And as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, rise up and live.